Sounds good.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Amy. Hello, Amy. Thank you for making time for us today. Really appreciate you
Hey,
coming on the
hi.
call.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. So we were talking before uh, about empowering kids,
Mhm.
and we've got these two things that we need to be doing. We need to be looking at ourselves as parents, and we're also looking to what we need to do and what we need to learn so that we can empower our kids. So we're going to explore that today. But before we do that, could you introduce yourself to the audience, please, Amy?
Sure. I'm Amy Reamer. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and also a registered play therapy supervisor. I live in the kind of Richmond, Virginia area. And I have a group practice here, and we specialize because I actually became a therapist because of adoption. So I have an adopted daughter and two sons by birth. So I just got really fascinated through that process of learning as a parent, figuring I gotta have to parent differently, about the impact, especially the neuroscience of like what happens to our brains and bodies. So so I became a therapist and specialize in adoption and developmental trauma.
Yeah, fantastic. I love your heart on this, and I love the lived experience that you're bringing to it. Um, so I've been listening to some trauma trainings or watching some trauma training videos, and they're obviously put out for adopted parents to watch and to listen to. And the thing that two or three things kept on going around in my head. The first one was, "This is great." The second one was, "How is anybody going to remember all this stuff?" And the third one was, "This is great, but it doesn't actually help me translate it and explain it to my kid. So
Mhm.
what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to do this all myself, when surely it would be easier to empower the child, about to change their own behavior, you know?"
Mhm.
And as you said before we started recording, this isn't an either or, this is a both. So what got you to this idea of helping helping kids understand their own emotions, and this tiger metaphor, and
Mhm.
that came to you from play parent? What was the genesis for this?
Sure. So, well, it was mainly from the kids themselves, different ages, younger kids, teenagers, where I basically saw them really just beating themselves up because of their own dysregulation, where their body would do things they didn't want it to do, or they would get out of control feelings, and or they would see later how their behavior sort of impacted someone else, and they would feel really bad, and then they would turn it around and kind of beat themselves up. And so me going in my head, kind of knowing this neuroscience of how their brain and their body's been impacted by things that have happened to them, or even just the thoughts that they're having, I was like, gosh, like if they knew that, they have a brain like everybody else, and this is kind of normal for what has happened to you. Your brain's doing what it's supposed to be doing based on your own history. Then maybe they wouldn't feel so bad, about themselves, because they've already got so much other things that are coming against them. This is not one that really should be in there. Like, this is a normal thing that your body is doing. And when they start to realize that, one, they have the same parts everybody else does, and then they also realize that they can actually make changes to what's going on in their brain and their body, and feel a sense of control, a sense of power. It's pretty powerful. And so for me, it was really about helping their hearts because I didn't like them being up on themselves for something that really was not a choice that they were making necessarily in that moment.
Yeah, that's so huge, isn't it?
Hmm.
Because we don't have as adults and parents, we don't have the monopoly on beating ourselves up, but seeing our kids beat ourselves up, uh, that's going to be causing that's going to be causing parents to beat themselves up about, and we're on a, whatever the opposite of we're on a vicious cycle there rather than a virtuous cycle. So would clearly this is an experience. You're talking about family therapy. You're talking about an experience, or what we're having is you and me just having a conversation about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What is there something that so normally the podcast the episode that I have they are conversations rather than sample activities, but something's triggering my intuition to say, is there something that you could describe now that could give the adoptive parents who are listening to this a little exercise that they could do with their own kids as an introduction to what they're doing?
Sure. So I would say, just learning about those parts. So like the tiger is sort of our amygdala, our survival system. And so the tiger is designed when your body feels something unsafe or off, because anything new is actually run by that system, because everything is deemed as unsafe until it's safe, right? So anything that's new goes by the tiger. And the tiger's job is to decide, okay, is this safe? Do I need to protect? And then if there's information like then the thinking part of the brain, which I refer to as the owl, will let the tiger know, oh, well, no, that's okay. That's safe. That's the neighbor. Remember, we met them the other day. They're okay. And so then the tiger will calm down, go back to sleep. And the hippo is our hippocampus. And so it's a lot about our memory and our learning. And so what I talk about is, and I teach kids and teach parents, is that when the tiger goes fully awake, so it feels like it's in danger, it's growling, it's doing whatever, then the owl flies away, the hippo goes under the water. And so we can't really think, we can't use our words, and we can't remember those things. So one of the biggest things I feel like is that we often are teaching people coping skills, right? And what to do when you're upset or things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. We certainly need to do that. But the problem is that those coping skills are learned, and those are with the hippo, and the hippo has gone under the water. And that's why folks can't remember to do those things when their tiger is fully awake. And so there's lots of different ways you can kind of go with that. And one thing I do with parents, I'll give you a quick one, is I call them tiger taming drills. And we practice for dysregulation. And I'll tell them, like, they do fire drills at school, right? Like, you practice for when there's a fire, and then hopefully the kids and the teachers will all remember what to do when there's an emergency. We don't practice for dysregulation. We don't practice for getting angry or scared or upset. We wait till it happens, and then we try to fix it. And that's often too late because the owl's not there and the hippo's under the water. So what we talk about is, it's not about eliminating any of these parts. They're all very important and needed, but it's about getting them kind of communicating better together. That's why it's called Tame the Tiger. So the metaphor of using these animals to talk about our brains can really just be a language that people can use. I call it a tiger, but I always give kids permission, that's what I use. And I've had kids use lions, tornado, lots of different things they've used for the tiger, but then it becomes personal, right? So that's even more empowering, because it's not my description of it, it's their description of it. But yeah, so I tell parents, your tigers could teach your tiger cubs to roar or to purr, so that's the role they have. But yeah, so that's a little bit, that's a quick kind of synopsis of it.
So the parents could using some props, because like I was watching the video, and if you want to check this out more, then in the show notes there's going to be a link to Amy's website, and you can see there's this cool video of Amy talking about this, and she's got some tiger glasses on, some tiger sunglasses, and she has a stuffed tiger. So it's really getting some props and looking at the different characteristics of these these animals. So maybe just one at a time,
Mhm.
and then this is a discussion piece, I guess, is it? This is
Oh
a
yeah.
discussion.
You can learn about your tiger. What wakes your tiger up? What helps it go back to sleep? Parents can share their own. It's very powerful for kids to hear they're not the only one. So, I mean, who doesn't get hangry, right? Like that's a big thing. When people get hungry, their tiger starts to kind of stir. And you get a little bit more irritable and fussy, and it's harder to think or make decisions, right? When you're really hungry. So that's a good example of everybody kind of has a tiger. Everyone does.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's very, very normalizing.
Yeah.
And you can, and it can be personalized. So like I said, it doesn't have to be a tiger, but you can, I've had kids draw their tiger what it looks like awake. I've had it what it looks like when it's asleep. You can use whatever works for your kids. So puppets or drawing or things like that. Yeah, whatever speaks to them.
Yeah. So this is a creative some creative expression, and
Mhm.
it can be personalized. And then I guess after, we're not going to introduce the tiger for the first time when the tiger's roaring, right?
That's
This is
right. You don't try to teach somebody to swim when they're drowning, right? You pull them out. Later, you give them some swim lessons and
Yeah,
teach them what to do so that hopefully, like if they're in that situation again, they won't drown. But
yeah,
we don't try to teach a lesson when someone's drowning. But when it comes to emotions, we often do that. And a lot of that's because when our kid's tiger wakes up, ours wakes up. And so if we learn about that, sometimes it helps us to actually stay calm and stay regulated so that their tiger can calm
yeah,
down too.
yeah. And what part does kind of, vulnerability, and sharing our own tiger stuff with our kids? How does that play a role with this?
Well, like you were saying, it helps kids to know they're not alone. There's not something wrong with them, that their parent also sort of has this, and also sharing success stories, right? Like a parent can share, it doesn't have to be a major trauma. It could just be like, you know, um, stubbing their toe and cursing at church or something. And then they're like, oh my gosh, and then they ran out of the room. That was their tiger. Their tiger was made them embarrassed. And so they were ashamed and they ran out of the room because they messed up. And so that shows kids that one, that make mistakes happen and people mess up, but then also that you can recover and you can be okay and you can come back, and they're not, you know, there's not something wrong with them. And it could really help empower their own sort of sense of self to see that there's a mirror. Everybody needs mirrors, right? And so you can have a mirror for someone that isn't perfect. Parents who try to hide everything they do that's wrong kind of gives kids a message that you're supposed to be perfect, if they project that. And so if you can show kids that, no, I'm not always perfect, and that this, happens, and then, you pick yourself up and you fix it and you go on. It's can be really powerful for kids in developing their own sense of self to see that their parent, isn't this perfect person either.
Yeah. I was thinking about, tigers in traffic. When somebody cuts us up,
Yeah.
I can see that as a tiger moment.
hmm Oh yeah. Yeah. And tigers, definitely are driven, by a lot of different emotions, but definitely fear is its big one. And of course, when someone cuts you off in traffic, it's scary. And you have this moment of, you could get hurt or your family could get hurt and you're afraid. And so, the tiger's, fighting back against the person that, could have harmed you. But yeah, yeah, big time. But then the owl is the one that says, but everybody's okay. There was no accident. We're all fine. Look around. And then you start to calm down. So that's the owl and the tiger working together. And so that's what you want, is you want them communicating, because that's all. I mean, we need all our parts of our brain, right? So we need them all to kind of talk to each other. But the person that, so let's say we have a tiger that isn't tamed in your example of the road rage, they're the person that like chases the person that cut them off and is cursing at them or runs into the back of their car because their owl doesn't kick in and calm them down to not like continue pursuing what they're feeling. So yeah, that's a good
Yeah, yeah.
example. Yeah.
So what would the hippo be doing then after that event?
So the hippo, I talk about that in when I'm like doing trainings, because I think it's important for parents to understand that impact of learning, and maybe even and for teachers, like when kids are in school, if they're dysregulated, they're not going to be taking in any new information because the hippo's not there. Um, the hippo, though, when I'm talking with kids directly, I don't tend to talk about the hippo so much because it's not as much of an active sort of character, where it's more like the tiger and the owl are the ones really communicating. But if kids do have issues with like remembering things, or if they're questioning why, like, so and so taught me to do deep breathing, but like that doesn't work, or I forget to do it, then I might help them understand like why they don't remember that. But the hippo is more of a consequence, so to speak, as opposed to sort of an active character.
Right. I've actually had breakfast with hippos
Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah.
in Kenya for our 10th wedding anniversary. We went to Kenya, and we went on a safari, and so we went to see the animals, and then we're going to have a breakfast with the hippos. So we parked up in the 4x4, and were led through this little the bush, like hedges, and into this clearing. And there was like an outside catering van that you would have a at a film shoot, for example, and the chefs had created, were cooking breakfast, and we had breakfast next to this, on the side of this riverbank, and the hippos were underneath, making
Wow.
making hippo noises. It was slightly off-putting, actually.
Well,
Slightly
and
off-putting was the
hippos,
noises.
technically hippos are extremely dangerous. So I guess they had some nice, like a setup there for you guys. But yeah.
Yeah, there was a big. It was like it was a bank. There was no way
Yeah, I
the
gotcha.
hippos could come and
Yeah,
get our breakfast. I don't know
yeah,
whether they'd like bacon and eggs anyway, but yeah. So I think that was what was behind my questioning of the hippos. So,
yeah.
so the hippos, perhaps less important than the owl
Yeah, I
the
mean,
owl and tiger.
in education of adults, I think the hippo is really important for people to understand, especially because memory drives a lot of what's going on. So if we have a memory of something that was scary and that gets triggered, then it's going to wake the tiger up. But for kids, I think because they're more active in what's happening, then the hippo is more sort of secondary. But that's why I include it when I'm sort of like, because that's the whole picture too. The tiger wakes up, owl flies away, hippo goes under the water. So yeah.
Okay, so we can talk about this stuff. We can reflect. We can talk about this stuff, and I guess once we've introduced the subject with our kids, then we can have the dialogue as appropriate in when the incidents occur. When they're driving the kid back from school and somebody cuts them up, or it may be the fact that they can say, you can have a dialogue about somebody else's tiger. The fact that the other driver has got angry, his tiger's come out to play or roar at you. So that this can be kind of embedded. People say, well, I haven't got time for it. So after we've done this initial start, then this can become part of the family dialogue, I guess.
Yeah, it's just a great communication tool. And I think what's great about it is it takes the focus off of either behavior or judgment, right? Like, because you're bad or you did something bad. And this isn't about, and now one thing I will say, because I get this from parents sometimes, is like, that you're gonna blame everything on the tiger, right? Like it's all the tiger's fault, and kind of give them an out. But I will also tell kids that it's their tiger, so their tiger is still their responsibility. So this isn't about, oh, we're just going to give something to blame, all the bad behavior or whatever on. This is literally about, this is a part of me, and this is it is still my responsibility to figure out how it works and to keep it, kind of under control if I need to, kind of thing. But yeah, it's not a difficult, concept. And I think that's what people that I've talked to that really liked it is they just like the simplicity of it. You don't have to remember amygdala and hippocampus. You don't have to remember those brain parts, but the concept of the tiger waking up and the owl flying away, everybody's like, oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think where you would actually have tigers and owls in the same part of the world. Anyway, this is
Yeah,
the
I know.
metaphor. Sometimes we try and stretch metaphors too far, listeners, and that's what I did then. So,
I actually
so
did find a picture of a baby owl and a tiger. I don't know if it had been photoshopped or not, but they were literally like looking at each other. And so I don't know, but that would
yeah,
be interesting.
so we can introduce this concept with some props and with some soft toys. We can draw. We can kids. So some kids really love drawing. So you can draw. Like they can draw. I guess they can draw the tiger roaring or purring.
Mm-hmm.
We can play it out. We can play it out with glove puppets. We can role play.
Mm-hmm.
We
Oh
can
yeah,
draw it.
acting it out would be great. Yeah.
Acting it out. Acting it
Yeah.
out. We could do stories. Kids like writing
Oh
stories.
yeah, they could give their tiger a name if they wanted to, and tell stories of how the, different things that happen. In therapy, part of play therapy is the safety of it is that distance from, I'm not necessarily talking about me, like if you tell a story or use an object. And so this gives some psychological distance from, the parts of the story that might be really hard. So that can be really helpful. I had a young lady one time that I had her draw the tiger awake and asleep, and her awake tiger, she put bags under its eyes. And she said it's so tired because it's awake all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a teenager. And so like they're exploring a lot of their own stuff, and I'm not having to do that. Like this is simply just saying, hey, it's normal for everybody to have a tiger. What's yours like?
Yeah.
And and going with that, and then you can use those metaphors. Like I said, I had a young man that used he called his a tornado, and I'm going, oh my gosh, like you can't really like control a tornado. Like what can you do? Like you can't tame a tornado, right? But then I got to thinking about folks that live in areas that have a lot of tornadoes. They have warnings, they have alarms, they have shelters. And so even though you may not be able to control the tornado, there are things you can do to keep yourself safe in the presence of a tornado. And so just recognizing, because I think this kid, a tornado was a really great metaphor because it really felt so out of control and he had no way of wrangling this thing in at all. And so by walking through even what people do in real life with tornadoes showed him that, okay, maybe something is much bigger than me, but there is still something I can do. And he came up with some great like things on his own that helped him to stay calm, and he actually kind of tamed his own tornado. It was
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
Yeah, a thing popped into my head is like in the eye of the tornado, is it still in the eye of the tornado? Like
I don't know about that as much as I know hurricanes have that,
hurricane.
but I don't know with the tornado. I think there is, and I don't want to use the movie Twister as an example because I don't know how scientifically accurate it was.
Yeah. So this really is about a creative flow and a conversation and whatever suits your child. So we talked about the play acting, we talked about drawing, we talked about writing.
Yeah.
You could do, they could even write something with speech bubbles, if they're drawing and
Yeah, what your tiger says, and
yeah, speech
yeah.
bubbles and thought bubbles as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thought bubbles. So this really is an opportunity to take Amy's metaphor, check out what she's doing on her site, and then uh, get into playing around this, but do it in a way that suits your child. So if they are, if they're more like, if they love writing, and maybe you could encourage them to write about this stuff. If they want to more playing, do that. If they're drawing, like, pick pick the processes and the activities that are going to suit your child, appeal to your child, and get them engaged in this, because it's really, we're just using this like well, it's a tiger, it's an owl, or it's a Trojan horse, aren't we? We're using these fun animals as a way to open up a dialogue and help our kids to get to a realization, express how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And the most important thing here, I think, is that we're normalizing it. We're saying that we have a tiger too, and sometimes we'd rather be the owl than the tiger, but the tiger sometimes takes over.
Hmm.
And I think that normalizing is so important.
It
Why?
is.
Why
It
is
is.
it? Why is it so normal? Why is the normalizing so important?
Well, because I think everybody, thinks that I'm the only one that sort of struggles with this, or I'm the only one that does this when I'm feeling this way. And it makes us feel different. And everybody wants to have some semblance of acceptance and be like others. And I like to use the term too hot to handle. And often kids will think, because they have these big emotions or they have these big behaviors and nobody kind of knows what to do, or people throw their hands up, or they kind of give up on them. And so they get this sort of idea that I'm sort of too hot to handle, I'm not fixable, it's hopeless. And so, or I'm going to be like this forever and it's never going to change. And when you don't have hope, that's a bad thing. That you got to have some hope for some motivation. And so I think this gives people hope that there is also a way to figure this out and to keep sort of helping.
Yeah.
And often in our society, a lot of emotions can be sort of demonized, or it's bad to get angry, or it's not ladylike to be angry, or whatever. And so there's some stigma sometimes to certain emotions. And then often kids don't know, and this is the thing, like owls don't fully develop until we're around 25 years old. So but tigers are fully developed at birth. And so you have a fully grown tiger when you're an infant because you need it to survive, but yet you don't have the ability to think and cognitively use a lot of tools until you're older. And as parents, often we expect kids to act like they have fully developed owls when they don't. And so there's an expectation sometimes to act better, or act older, or act more mature, or to know that feeling or know that word, when often we don't know. And so I think there's also that expectation put on kids to handle emotions and know emotions the way adults do. And they don't. And that's they live more in an emotional world. They don't live in a words world. They don't live in a vocabulary world. Um, so like with kids, a lot of times when we're talking about like something that happened at school and a parent's talking about a behavior or whatever, and they'll ask them, well, how are you feeling? When Johnny shoved you, how did you feel? I don't know. And then I'll ask them, well, what color were you? Oh, I was red. And so, because colors live in the part of the brain closer to emotions than words do. So you would say colors are kind of more of a tiger thing. Um, and so you have to understand the development of kids and sort of the language that they have. And often as adults, we forget and we kind of expect kids to have the adult language, or they need to talk about it. Well, sometimes we don't have to talk about everything, but we do need to control how it impacts us. Um, And we also understand how tigers interact, which is, probably another whole talk. But, I think when you're talking about parents exploring this, using this metaphor to explore with their kids, they can do it with themselves too. Because there are lots of things that kids will say and do that will wake our tiger up, and the kid might be fine, but our tiger gets woken up. And so us understanding our own tiger is going to help, in relationships as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a place here for couples to talk, to share tiger and owl stories.
I use it in couples therapy as well. We
Yeah.
talk about, their own tigers and owls and what wakes them up, and often it's our own, what we're thinking our partner is thinking or whatever, So, we our owls could actually get our tigers kind of going because we think too much. But yeah, I mean, it's not a metaphor that is just for kids. It is actually something that actually works pretty well for people to start exploring their own makeup of what gets us riled up and what helps us to calm down and all that.
Yeah, that insight that you just shared about the tigers being fully grown at birth, but the owls not fully developed till we're 25. That's a gem of an insight. Are there any other kind of tiger facts that you have that
So what also I think is interesting is that the tiger doesn't know the difference between past, present, and future. The tiger only lives in the present. So if you are thinking about something that happened to you 10 years ago, let's say you had a loss 10 years ago, and you start thinking about that person and feeling sad, the tiger thinks it's happening again because you're thinking about it and you're feeling it, it's happening. And this is why the tiger reacts to things from our past or things we're just thinking about, or a memory that we have, or if you meet someone and they have a mannerism of someone who abused you and you don't even recognize the mannerism. It could be their crooked smile or, the voice, but your body goes into this kind of panic with a person that's being perfectly nice because you're not seeing the perfectly nice, safe person in front of you. That voice sounds like a person that hurt you. And now the tiger is awake. So I think that's another concept a lot of people don't understand, is that our survival system doesn't work in the nature of past, present, future. The owl knows the difference, but if the owl has flown away, then the tiger's kind of in control. So it's kind of a hallmark of PTSD, if you think about it from that respect of like flashbacks and things like that. That's why the body responds the way that it would have back in the original event, not what's happening actually in the moment right now.
Yeah. There's a few things in my recent past that I can see now are tiger stirrings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a feeling. It's a felt experience. It's not just, I feel it in my body, not just a.
Yeah. Tiger is definitely kind of body. I mean, if you want to, give them an area, tiger tends to be more of our body, and obviously owl tends to be kind of our head.
So what are some of the signs in our body that of the tiger waking up?
Yeah. So I would physiologically, or usually heart rate's going faster, breathing is getting more rapid. People can sweat. All of the signs of that people would associate kind of with a panic attack, even if you don't go into a full on panic attack, that's the physiological changes. Blood pressure goes up. If you're in fight flight, actually, your digestion slows. And so, it's interesting, like if you do assessments with people, like when you first meet them and you talk about like medical history, folks who have like issues with, or even children, if they have a lot of constipation, that's a sign that their tiger's awake a lot, because in fight flight, digestion slows down. So there's or if they have, they're continually running a high heart rate, or blood pressure is, abnormally high for their age. It's probably a sign that they're kind of stuck in sort of tiger mode, and they're not resting and relaxing and going back. to be in a sort of a good space. So there's a lot of physiological stuff, but for some people, it's usually kind of those panicky kind of signs, just sort of feeling unsafe or feeling like you need to escape, or, I need to get out of here, or, something like that. Just uneasiness feeling. Then for different people, that could be different things. That could be butterflies sort of in the stomach, or you kind of stomach turning over a little bit. Could be chest tightening. Throat tightening is a big one. A lot of people will feel kind of this tightness, or having trouble finding something to say. Think about like when you have grief, right? Sometimes everything sort of closes up and it's hard to talk. So yeah, so lots of different physiological signs. But I usually just, with kids, you can do things like, you can have a lot of play therapists do this, where they use like a gingerbread man outline, kind of a picture, and have kids draw where they feel, different things. And I can do that too, or I'll have them color the different emotions or different feelings or sensations in their body when the tiger's awake and when it's asleep. So you can actually use the metaphor of the tiger, but in a therapy setting, you can actually go into more of what's going on sort of in their body when the tiger's awake versus when it's asleep.
Yeah. So presumably, do you, as you're describing here, you're talking about training parents to do this stuff with their kids. Presumably you do that with some of your clients as well, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't go into probably those types of more of the therapeutic type of stuff, because I would do that more probably in a therapy session, but
Yeah.
Definitely like using the other things that you're talking about, stories or drawing, or just even using the metaphor, of, and sometimes parents are going to notice it before the kid does, and that's going to help bring awareness. So if they say, oh, it looks kind of like your tiger's starting to stir, is it stirring? I can see that look on your face. And that can sometimes actually help the kid to slow down, and then they can use those coping skills that
Yeah.
they've learned, because they haven't gone full blown tiger, right? Like their owl and hippo are still there. So then it's like, oh, okay. And they can like do those deep breaths, or, whatever they've, learned is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that pops into my head there is it ever possible to do it the other way around? So I used to do a lot of activities in elementary schools in the UK, and it was different metaphors, but it was essentially thoughts and feelings and stuff.
Mhm.
And I used to try and flip it around, so make the child the teacher,
Mhm. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so that we empower them. So because they think that, well, I did, you're a kid, you think, oh, my parents are waiting for a chance to tell me about this or something like that. But you then flip them round, and so you can say, well, so like you could have ask them to be on the, can we, can we do Tiger Watch together?
Mhm.
Can we do
Yeah.
Tiger Watch together? So what are some of the signs that you think that when my tiger's coming out to play,
Mhm.
and
Oh yeah.
the kid becomes the teacher?
Oh yeah, and you'll be most people might not be surprised, but kids usually can name all the signs of their parents' tigers waking up. Like that's it's much easier. We know that it's much easier, like kind of to name it on someone else sometimes than it is like to recognize it in ourselves. But oh yeah, I mean, you could have them like, you teach me about my tiger, and and then we'll learn about yours,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's awesome.
So that's a really important lesson you just shared there. It's difficult to see our own tiger,
Yeah.
and I guess it's difficult to see our own owl as well. So we need to be. This is a family trip to the zoo, isn't it? Where you mentioned something earlier on about our kids being angry with themselves,
Hmm.
and that sort of, and being angry within ourselves about ourselves, whatever age we are. The owl's not going to be. The owl's not going to be around much, is he? Or she. So if we can share that with the kids and talk to them about that, and that's why we need to be tiger aware as a family.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I had um it was a client of one of my other therapists in my practice that the parent had I had actually written a book that, to help kids with this. And he came in and they said, Amy, one of my clients, wanted to meet you because your book was so impactful for him. And it was so touching to my heart because, like I know my clients I work with and have seen things, with them, but to see someone who I had not personally had any, contact with, he was so mom's like, he has me read this book every single night. And because I think it was just normalizing for him, like that I'm not crazy, I'm not stupid, I'm not broken. I'm This is normal to have all of these parts, and what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing. And then I can actually like make some changes here if I want to, like I actually can have some control. And so it was just really touching, and to see how powerful that story was for him to understand what was sort of kind of going on in his own body. And that's can be hard because again, they don't have a fully developed owl. They don't know a lot of the things that we do as adults. And so it can be a foreign land going on in here. It's a foreign world of what's happening, and that's scary.
Yeah. Is there a book mentioned on the website?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So there've been links into that, but I think there's something quite important there as well. To me, is we're in this together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
we're in, we're in this together, and the other vital thing is that what oh yeah what seems too simple, because we're brought up on the idea of complexity, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Like have you read this book? Have you read The Chimp Paradox? Have you read that book?
No,
The,
what's
the
that?
Chimp Paradox. Well, it's a guy who's got a model a bit like yours.
Okay, nice.
um and he has but it's an awfully long book. It's really popular, and he's done a kids version as well. But I read it, and it was like it was just too long for me. And we've got this. We're raised on this idea that long, you know, length of books and complexity and all this sort of stuff is, and that's what you need. Well, that's not what you need when it comes to explaining things to kids. We need
Yeah.
child friendly, empowering metaphors that help kids understand what's going on, understand, as you say, that it's normal, and
Hmm.
that we all feel like that. So they don't feel like freaks when they're freaking out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it as adults, control feels really good to us, right? And as adults, we generally have a lot of control over our lives, where we go, what we do, those kinds of things. Kids don't live in worlds that they control a whole lot. Like they're told what to do, where to go, how to act, and so, and then when your own body you can't even control your own body sometimes because it's freaking out or and having a tantrum or throwing things or whatever. I mean, just imagine how scary that is, that like the external world I have no control, and now my internal world I don't have control either. And that's very defeating
Yeah.
and very tiring and very sad and hopeless. And so I think that's what this helping kids to understand what's sort of kind of going on in their brain, and the fact that it's based in actual neuroscience. So like, yes, you can, I mean, I've learned this through my studies and studying like Dr. Bruce Perry, who has the great like What Happened to You book with Oprah, right? Like, so that What Happened to You book is great for adults, but how do you take that and explain that to kids? And so this is kind of takes all of that sort of neuroscience stuff. And of course, it's not going to be exactly perfect of when the hippo goes under the water or whatever, but that I'm not worried about it being, you know, exact science. It's science enough to help kids get what's going on. And then you can go from there, right? Like they don't need to know all the big words and why it got there or whatever. Now, sometimes with kids, I will help them to understand because you weren't taken care of well, because you got scared a lot. Now your tiger's a very light sleeper and it wakes up to things it really doesn't need to wake up to, but it thinks it does because there were so many bad things happening when you were little. And it doesn't even realize that you're in a safe place now. So if you come back to sort of foster care or adoption, this is why you take a kid that's 3 years old that's lived in domestic violence or lived with abuse for 3 years, you take them to a home that's safe. That tiger doesn't necessarily recognize that this is now a nice, loving, safe, happy, you know, caring, loving family. It's still operating the way that it did for 3 years. And that's a good concept for parents, because they don't quite get why this child who is now physically safe, is getting fed, is getting cared for, is still acting as if, you know, they have to survive.
So I think that's fantastic. The thing that popped into my head as you were describing that was the fact that, you know, the tiger's rescued, right? The tiger's rescued because it's lost its mum and dad in the Serengeti, and it's in the zoo, and it's safe in the zoo, but it's still a tiger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, this has been great, and it's been a completely different episode to what we normally do. I've enjoyed this one. I've enjoyed playing with you, learning your metaphor, and I think it's brilliant. And if you if you're listening, if you're still listening, you clearly don't think it's nuts. But maybe if you thought it's nuts, you tuned out earlier on. I think it's fantastic, and I encourage you to have a go at this. And the thing that pops into my head was when I came up with my metaphors for this kind of thing a few years ago. The first person that I tried it on was our goddaughter, and she loved it. And then 3 months later, I went to see her and gave her an update on what we're doing. And I said, the thing is, Sophie, that adults don't seem to get this. And she said, well, you created it for kids, Uncle Simon, not for grown-ups. So don't, like, this, what's more important, you know, what's most important to you listeners is the emotional well-being of your kids. And this is a great tool, a great idea. So check out the show notes. Check out Amy talking about this stuff, and check out her cool glasses, tiger glasses, and tiger toy. Yeah, before we bring it in, anything else you'd like to share, Amy?
No, I just appreciate, you know, you're giving me this opportunity to talk and love like your insights and yeah, I appreciate it. And you're right, like this is certainly a passion for me and passion for kids and families, you know. So I just appreciate being able to share, and I hope it's helpful to somebody.
Yeah. And check out what Amy's doing, parents, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks a lot, Amy. Thanks,
Thank
listeners.
you.
Bye-bye.